Hariom. My name is Sanika. I study at Glenview Park Secondary School in Cambridge, Ontario. I am currently in grade 10 and welcome to the Youth and Teens e-learning forum. 14 of us are currently undergoing e-learning study from Swamiji to assimilate the lecture's insights. We have a weekly review and interaction forum with Rangaji. This week's review is from Select English Poems. This interactive format of listening to Swamiji's lectures and reviewing the learning through group discussions has been an awesome experience for us. You can encourage your younger audiences and your families to join us in the e-learning and review forums. Thank you.
Hariom, today is our second Q&A, and we're going to take up poems from lectures 3, 4, and 5.
So for Casa, Bianca, I had difficulty choosing between faith and surrender for the one-word summary. And I'm not really sure if I completely understand the difference between those two either. So maybe someone can jump in the end, or if Rangaji can clarify it later on. But I'm gonna go with surrender. So in summary, it's about a young boy that accompanies his father on a ship, and the father instructs the boy to stand on deck while he attempts to work below deck. But the ship catches fire, and the portion below deck burns first, killing the boy's father. As the flames approach the boy, he calls out to his father, asking if he may leave. And he dies waiting for his father's permission or his response. So the boy is not foolish, nor does he show blind faith. Rather, his faith is unwavering and sincere. And from this, we should learn that once you establish faith in someone, especially a guru, you must surrender to them completely. And questioning is encouraged to develop your intellect, but you should question to gain clarifications and further insights, and not the intent of the guru itself, so not the intent itself. And if you're questioning without the purpose of gaining knowledge, then I guess you haven't surrendered yet. So the italics verse, say, Father, say, if yet my task be done, the boy is asking if he has fulfilled his duty. He's not questioning his father's intent. And he doesn't ask, Father, do you want me to die on this ship or something? He's asking, is my duty done? And I think faith has the potential to waver, but surrender in essence doesn't have that quality. And so that's why I ended up going with it, but someone might have a different opinion on this, or maybe there isn't really a difference between the two. So if anyone wants to jump in with their opinion on the difference between faith and surrender, and if they went with a different word for this poem, I would love to know that.
Great. Do you have any other questions, or does anybody have anything to add? Okay, so I guess we'll move on. Next, we have the mountain and the squirrel, and we have Agam doing the summary.
Yes. So after reading the poem, the first word that comes to mind for mountain and the squirrel would be unity. And essentially, this word comes because the summary for the poem essentially is there's two characters. There's a personification for a mountain and then a squirrel, and they're kind of in a quarrel or an argument, and they're going back and back. And of course, it seems the mountain probably instigated the argument. So then the squirrel responds very strategically, I would say, where it identifies the different talents that they both equally have, or not equally, or they both possess in their own capacities. So although the mountain is huge, it's big, it carries forests on its backs, rivers, ravines, and etc. However, the small movable squirrel is able to do something that the mountain cannot, and that's crack a nut, right? So essentially it's saying, even though someone's small in doing their actions, yet someone is huge carrying the forest within which upon the squirrel lives in. It doesn't really matter, because everyone has their own capacity and their own talents, which essentially create the forest. So the what I got from here in relating to personal life, so we see plants and animals, and we can usually identify the different species. I see dogs, a new dog in my neighborhood every day. and there's a different breed, there's different species just within that animal class. Yet when it comes to humans, we kind of have this, we either complexes or inferiority, where we think that humans are all just one, and then someone should be as good as me, or I should be as good as them. Yet we don't see that each human is its own species. So that's something that I took from that, that's practical, looking at each human as a species of itself, right? So that's the uniqueness of each other. And yeah, so that's my summary there.
Perfect. Does any after each poem, like if anybody has something to add or any questions? All right.
I like
Yeah,
that.
Shannon. Sorry. Yeah, go
That's
ahead.
okay. I like the word unity because I was also like, it wasn't mentioned directly, I guess, but I was wondering if it also kind of, the poem kind of also touches on the concept of swadharma that we learned in Satsanga, which is like your inherent nature. So like the squirrel has a certain role to play and the mountain has a certain role to play. And so if you just kind of focus on like cherishing your own talent, rather than focusing on what other people's talents are, what they aren't, or whatever, what you lack, like just focus on what you can do and then do it the best you can. I guess it kind of touches on Swadharma too, maybe.
Okay, so our next poem is The Nightingale and the Glowworm, and we're gonna have Nidhi give her summary.
All right, so the poem I did was Nightingale and the Glowworm. And the word I chose, well, I couldn't really decide for one word, so I chose respect and unity. So this poem essentially tells the tale of a nightingale that has been singing all night, like all day long, and has been cheering up the people of the village with its song. And as night begins to fall, the nightingale starts feeling hungry, so it leaves to hunt for food. And it spots a light, and upon closer look, it discovers a glowworm, which was glowing. So it plans to eat the glowworm, but by now the glowworm had sort of sensed that there was the bird that wanted to eat it. And so to save its life, it kind of gave a lecture to the glowworm, to the nightingale. And in its speech to the bird, the glowworm praises the nightingale singing and explains how it would never want the bird singing to cease, as it brings joy to the people. And similarly, the bird should not try and diminish the worm's glow, as it produces light that also brings joy. And so it asks for mutual respect, as they both have been created by God and therefore should coexist in peace. And it explains how God has gifted them each with different yet beautiful talents, and they should be used together rather than against each other to spread beauty and cheer in the world. And so hearing this, the nightingale agrees and decides to head off to find supper elsewhere. So I think in this poem, it really highlights the fact that everyone is unique and has their own purpose, and that we should neither judge nor discriminate against someone based on that. And I think we all have our unique traits, and we should come together as one to let it shine. Like how the nightingale is a skilled singer and the glowworm produces light, and together they make the night more beautiful. And it's only by respecting each other's uniqueness can we truly experience and enjoy life with harmonious existence. And I think another point that was made in the poem is that we all may look and talk and act differently, but within us is the same sort of divine power. And so when we relate this to life, a lot of examples come to mind, but the basic concept, in my opinion, is that we should accept everyone for who and what they are in order to live peacefully. And rather than fighting with each other and wasting our energy, we should focus on uniting and strengthening ourselves as a unit. So again, we all have that same divine power within us, and no matter which religion or culture we are part of, and we all have different approaches to life and need to accept that and live together peacefully with balance. So the italicized quote was, "For 'twas the self same power divine taught you to sing and me to shine, that you with music and I with light might beautify the cheer of the night." So this quote really reflects the fact that we are all same in the end, with the same divine power within us, although we may look different, and together we are harmonious.
Great. So before we have anybody add anything, we're just gonna have Dhruva give his summary. He's also summarizing the Nightingale and the Glowworm.
The Nightingale and the Glowworm. So the word I thought about this poem as soon as reading and looking at and hearing the lecture was unity. So because of the message that comes afterwards. So in short, to summarize, the nightingale is known for its song, and it was singing and cheering the village all day with its song, while the glowworm entertains the village at night with its glow and this thing. So once, out of hunger, the nightingale wanted to eat a glowworm. The glowworm wanted to defend itself, so it told the nightingale that you have your qualities. You, or rather, we both have our own qualities. Your singing cheers the night, whereas my light and my color beautifies the night, and we both together can help cheer the village. But if you kill me, you're killing half of that, and it's not. And with what we can do, we can cheer the village together and eradicate this darkness. Why do you want to take away half because of your selfish need of hunger? The uh, the nightingale listened to this and went searching for other prey. And the poet then makes a comparison to the human qualities of bhakti by the singing of by the nightingale singing bhakti and invocation, and compares the glowworm's light to education and knowledge. And it says that together with invocation and knowledge, you can conquer the world. But then if you seek to uh, put one quality over the other, or if you seek to quarrel among yourselves, it will lead to destruction uh, and destruction, and lots of property, life, etc. Basically bad things. Then the other point very nicely highlighted was brother should not fight with brother. So you need to understand your qualities, understand the qualities of people around you, should not make judgments, and you should be happy with yourself and try your best to mutually coexist and respect others. And then the second thing is, which I felt striking in this poem, was the selfish desire of the nightingale to eat the glowworm, when, as I mentioned before, and as the previous person mentioned, when together they can beautify the night. And the night has been metaphorized to ignorance. So if you together invoke bhakti as well as knowledge, you can wipe what's that called, ignorance out of the world. So yeah, this is what I made of the poem. Any questions? And the phrase or the quote I could relate to this poem very well was, "Divided we fall, united we stand." Yeah, anyone would like to ask any questions? You can go ahead.
The idea of combining that you said, Dhruva, is really interesting, like combining the path of bhakti and jnana, like that you got out of it. Because I was thinking, like, if you maybe like the path that we choose, like maybe it needs to be determined by our inherent nature. Like if the bird just sings, right? Like it can't glow, and the worm can't sing. So I was thinking in terms of that maybe like you have to choose your path towards enlightenment in a way that matches your personality, because you won't be successful as a bird if you try to glow. But then you took that idea in a different way, that like if you combine both things. So that's a really interesting view, and I like that better actually, because why not try to combine both views?
Again, like the same thing. Each of our things correct in a unique way. So
Yeah.
there's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So next we're gonna have Naveen summarize the pineapple on the beat.
Yeah, so first of all, to put the poem in one word, I would use the word acquiring, because this is about the results or the consequences of acquiring or attempting to acquire certain things or certain objects. The poem is about a bee trying to get the pleasure of consuming a pineapple in a supermarket, but the pineapple obviously is meant for people who will buy them, and the bee is trying to consume it and he was unable to. This is implying that some things are not always meant for us. The main points that I took away from this poem are that some things that we seek aren't always necessarily meant for us or like for our use. You can spend your entire life acquiring and enjoying things, but the more you acquire, the more you want to acquire, the more you enjoy, the more you want to enjoy it. This can result in like just unhappiness for us. Another point that I also took away is that many people spend their lives in material pursuit, which means like just trying to get material objects after material objects like cars and jewelry and all these things that might not give us like pure happiness. And from this, they might just end up unhappy. But people who can find happiness in what they have and the people that they have are like the people that I believe they can be truly happy in life. But they find happiness with what they have. This is an example of pulling honey from a weed, as Swamiji said in the lecture. And in this case, obviously, like I said earlier, the bee wasn't able to reach the pineapple. And this is an example for exposed to view, but not to touch, because he can enjoy the pleasure of seeing it, but not like when Swamiji said not to touch, that means he cannot directly consume it or use it because it's not meant for him. This relates to the word acquiring, because the bee is trying to acquire something that was not meant for him, obviously, as I said earlier, and the result of not being able to acquire it makes him unhappy. This is because obviously a pineapple does not fall on the list of things a bee consumes. This can absolutely happen in our lives, and I think that we should learn to be happy with what we have and acquire things that would bring us true happiness. Like, certain people maybe they can be materialistic objects, but that depends on the people. So yeah, I think learning to be happy with what we have, and that will bring us true happiness. So yeah, that's my summary.
Great. If anyone has something to add, again, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question for Naveen. So the comment would be, I think you did a great job. So identifying the extracting honey from a weed. But one thing you did mention, you said acquiring doesn't give you happiness. I'm curious, I know you're summarizing this, but
yeah. I think I kind of worded that wrong. I get what you mean. I get what
no. I'm asking you a question now, because that's essentially what it's saying. It's saying that yes, you don't want to get into the loop of acquiring and all that.
Yeah.
But now my question is, if like the bee is equipped with extracting nectar and honey,
For
right?
sure,
So
yeah.
similarly, like us, like some of us, we are keen to extract for additional knowledge from school, money from businesses, etc. Right. So we have our different equipments. Now, my question for you is, where is that weed in real life? So like, so if somebody sees opportunity, but it's kind of hidden behind a glass. So where is that? I'm curious to just get your idea from there.
I would think what my answer is, like, on the spot, is that the weed is like obstacles that we have in life, like things that are in our way. Like example, like for example, you said if there's like something, like, what did you say? If there was like a piece of glass in between like us and our goals, that we said, yeah. So that glass would be the weed. That would be the obstacle that's in front of us that like will stop us from acquiring certain things. So I think I think it's a matter of like giving up and not giving up, like trying to reach your goals, and that depends on how bad you want it, I think. But yeah, that's like my answer. Sorry if I couldn't answer your question properly.
Okay, so next we have the toys. It's going to be summarized by Mritila.
Yeah. So the one word that I think summarizes the poem Toys is desires. So the summary of the poem is that the poem's about a father and a son. The son kept disturbing his father, and for this, he kept disobeying him as well. And for the 7th time, he struck him and he asked him to go to bed. So this boy went back to bed, sobbed, but he went to sleep later. This boy did not have a mother. She passed away earlier in life. And after some time, this father regretted his action and was upset that his son was hurt. So he wanted to see if the boy slept or not, as he was worried that this might affect his sleep. So the father went to see if the boy was asleep, and he was asleep, but his eyelids were still wet. He then found some toys on the table next to the bed, which the boy would have played earlier with to comfort himself. The father felt sad after seeing the child's innocence, and later that night, he prayed to God to forgive him for all his petty desires and his childishness. So I guess the poem first starts talking about a boy who was supposedly very wise, but after the father saw his toys, he understood the boy's childishness. So the comparison here with humans is that we also act very wise, but we are all filled with childishness inside because we all have desires for name, fame, power, position, etc. The boy who was sad before thought that he can forget about everything and become happy by playing with the toys. And this relates with humans, as we all think that we can become happy and all our pain will go away if we get all these petty things in life. And lastly, we can see how the father prays to God, which denotes bhakti, asking him to forgive him as he also had these desires for these petty things and thought that acquiring those would make him happy. But he prays to God to understand him. And this poem basically talks about how desire stands between a barrier between human and God, and maybe eradicating them would help us understand God properly. So I guess learning Vedanta would give us a sense of purpose, and just like that line from the pineapple and the bee, we need to try to find happiness from within rather than from name, fame, power, and etc. So that's my summary.
All right, again, anything, if anybody wants to add? Okay, so the next one's going to be the blind man and the elephant, and Anish will summarize it.
So the word that came to my mind when I heard this poem was perspective. Because they're all so in the summary, multiple blind men come together, and they want to go and see an elephant, but they're all blind. So when they find an elephant, they each touch different parts of the elephant. One person touches the leg, says it's a tree. One touches the tail, says it's a rope, and they go on and on. But they're all touching different parts of the elephant. They all ridicule each other, saying that they're all wrong, but they don't know what the other person is touching. And then in the end, none of them get the full scope of the elephant. Something I got from this poem was how from what it was said in the lecture, the more ignorant you are, the more sure you are of what you say, no matter whether it is true or not. So perspective is always there because there was always multiple people looking at the same thing. It's like why we do this, so we can have multiple people looking in on the same thing to get different ideas. So I feel like perspective is always going to be part of whatever we do, whatever people see. People are always going to look at things different than you. So you have to learn to accept those differences and maybe learn from them.
Yeah, adding on to what you said, Anish, I was just going to say that the word I chose for this poem was ego, because no matter like depending on which part of the elephant the blind man contacted, they were so convinced that that was what the elephant was like. So when someone has like so much ego, no one in the world can convince them of anything different, and that's what you mentioned. And so it's kind of like everyone has a perspective, but they think that it's the ego in them that makes them believe that that is the only perspective, and it like hinders their ability to take other people's perspectives into account.
Okay, so next we have Vanshi summarizing the village preacher.
Okay, so the one word that I think that describes the poem is noble. The poem is about a man who lived a modest and peaceful life. He was a rich man, but still treated everybody the same, whether they were rich or poor. On top of that, he always helped the people around him, and that is why he was so respected in his village. I think the main idea is that we should control our desires and use our intellect to make the right decisions like the man in the poem did. The man was quite rich, but he easily could have bought anything he wanted with his money and fulfilled his desires, like a house or a car or whatever else he wanted. But instead, he used that money to help those around him. So this describes that he was a noble man and an ideal human being. That's it.
Again, if anybody wants to add anything, any questions?
Yep, I'll add a comment to that. So you mentioned that he was a very rich man. I like that you noted that out. But what I picked up from here was essentially he's a rich man in regards to his desires because he lives in a village, right? He doesn't live in this big city with the big expenses and all that. So essentially he's a rich man because he has less desires. I think that's something I would add to that.
So the final poem is on his blindness, and I'm going to be summarizing that. So the one word I chose for this poem was expectation. So the summary, basically this poem starts off with like a poet, like the poet of the poem expressing how he went blind like halfway through his career or like halfway through his life. And he basically talks about how his talent is now useless because he can't see. And before that, he was like a very successful poet. And then he complains to God over the fact that God expects him to become like a really good poet, even with like considering his blindness. And basically later on in the poem, he receives a message which tells him that God doesn't need like humans' work or his own gift, and he doesn't expect anything from anyone. So he soon realizes that everyone serves God, even people like who work and people who don't, like they still serve God at the end of the day. So what I took away from this poem was that it basically tells us about God's like state and the fact that God like had no desire from humans. And the poet was like worrying about God's expectations on him and everything, but like he later learns that God doesn't actually expect anything from him. And basically there was like this line in the poem which said, bear his mild yoke, they serve him the best, his state is kingly. And basically this line means that people who commit unselfish acts are actually the ones like who serve God, rather than like people who chase desires or anything like that. So like people who are unselfish and don't have an ego, like those are basically like God's people. And the quote I had related to my one word is that God does not need either man's work or his own gift, because this quote basically shows that God does not have any desires of like any sort. And my word was expectation, and like the poet was like so sure that God expected him to like continue writing poems and stuff, but he later learns that God doesn't actually expect anything from anybody, and God is just kind of like observing what's going on. And yeah, that's it. So if anybody has something to add or anything, go ahead.
I would just ask if Rangaji had anything to add to the poems.
Certainly. We are done with the summaries. Is there anyone who did not get a summary to do? Aparna did speak. Aparna, you have anything to add to any one of the poems?
Yeah, I was just gonna add something to this poem on his blindness. So for me, the thing that stood out the most in this poem is the concept of objectivity. So for me, like when I read this poem, I was just thinking that like the poet or the person who's writing it, he feels that writing is his talent, is his ability, right? And so like it's something that he feels on himself. Like it's not like, you know, like someone told him that this is his talent and something. So what I took away is that it's not really the nature of the action that matters in life. It's more of like the attitude towards which you perform that action and the objectivity that you're able to hold behind it that matters the most. So that's kind of what I took away from it.
Okay.
Anything to add to any one of the poems?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to, I guess, on his blindness. I guess that's more of a question that I had. In this, like, it's very interesting the way he starts the poem. It seems more like he's just complaining, like, I have this eyesight, you've taken it away from me. And then afterwards, like Swamiji explained, it's more like it's all introspection. He's just discussing about the way he, like, about thoughts that he shouldn't have. And then so it kind of like builds that idea of like ignorance on God and like having ignorance in general. And so like this is an example of something that happened to me like last week or something. Basically my parents asked me like do some prayers by the like at our home like Monday, and there my parents told me like, oh, sit on the floor instead of using a chair or standing, because our temple is like a little bit higher off the ground. So I was like, why do we need to sit? I don't see any reason to, because like I'm not at eye level. And then then they're like, oh, you don't properly understand it, you're just being a little ignorant. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll ask.
So the question is, why is that we need to sit on the floor?
Yeah, for rituals and practices.
There is no compulsion that one has to sit on the floor for rituals and practices. We are living in a country where you can't sleep on the floor. You can't sit on the floor. So where all these rituals were practiced, like why is that when you go to a South Indian temple, the priest doesn't wear a shirt? Why is that when you go to a temple in Delhi, in Bangalore, you would find the person wears a sweater and a shawl over? What is right, what is wrong? So the South Indian temples are in Chennai, where you can't wear a sweater and a shawl. In Bangalore, if you go bare-bodied, you will get pneumonia. So there are certain things that are essentials. There are certain things that are non-essentials. I am reminded of an example, Yash. Swami Chinmayananda used to give this example. A boy who got married and he set up his own family. He started or continued the rituals that were observed by his own parents. So he established his own family, he had his own house, and he called a priest and his friends to continue the prayer that they do in the family. And he sent one of his friends to get hold of a cat. How many of you have heard of this story? He called one of his friends and said, bring a cat. So the priest said, why do you need a cat? Because we have to do puja. So the priest kept quiet. And he sent another friend to bring a basket. So before the puja started, he got hold of a cat. Another friend brought a basket. He covered the cat with the basket. And the entire time of ritual, the cat was held hostage inside the basket. The priest asked him, what is this practice? He said, don't you know, every puja, every ritual starts with covering a cat with a basket? The priest said, I have never heard of all this. He said, no, my father and mother used to do it all the time. That is because there was a cat in their house. Right? He was brought up in a house where there was a pet cat. And that cat doesn't allow you to do the puja in peace. So first thing that they had to do was to cover it with a basket. Why are you getting hold of a cat and covering it with a basket when you don't have a pet in your house? Correct? So this is an innocuous poem or an innocuous example to say, when we don't understand why we have to do certain things, they become a well-ingrained way in our life. So many such practices are nothing but conditioning. What is that we should do in that situation? If you are of an analytical type, you just pretend going along. Correct, Yash? It is difficult to pretend to be wise. It is easy to pretend to be stupid. Correct? In a group of very wise and intelligent people, can you pretend to be a scientist? Within 2 minutes, they will make out, this fellow knows nothing about science. I go and speak some examples on science. 1 minute they will know, this fellow knows no science. So it is difficult to pretend wise, but it is easy to pretend to be a stupid when you play with children. With children, you don't have to show your intelligence. You can become a child with them. Similarly, even if we have learnt a few things rationally with the intellect, you understand, this is the way they do certain things. Just as you got a chance in your life to learn, they will get their own time when they are ready to use the intellect. I'm not talking about your parents, I'm talking about our approach to life. So why is that they do certain things? Because they were brought up in a house where there was a cat. So unless there is a cat and unless there is a basket, their prayer doesn't start. But we are brought up in a house where there is no cat, there is no need for basket. So you start the prayer without a cat in the basket. That's the difference. So why is that we have to do? You differentiate between essentials and non-essentials. Essential is orientation of mind. That hardly any one of us are able to do. Non-essential is having people home. Non-essential is decorating. Non-essential is particular flower. Non-essential is a direction where you have to see. You have to be seated looking at south, looking at north. These are non-essentials. Prayerfulness is the essential part. Okay, Yash?
Yep, sounds good.
Yes, Keshav.
I think we can move on to the questions if the summaries are done.
Yeah, do you have a question?
No, I'm supposed to read the questions out loud.
Yes, please.
Okay, so question 2C is from Agam, and his question is from the poem Blind Man and the Elephant. And he says, is this poem to say that one can't understand the whole by adding up the parts, as the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? Yet one with an intellect can clearly see the whole. Is this just a personification or of a wise person or a practical endeavor?
The Blind Man and the Elephant. If you have the poems book, page 35, or the summary given by Swamiji, it says, 6 blind men went to see, within quotes. That's how the poem itself starts. It was 6 blind men of Hindustan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant. So what the poem is trying to say is not that all 6 people come together, reach complete knowledge. Blindness and seeing are opposed to each other. You can bring 1 million blind men, they will still not know what an elephant is. If you want to see, you need eyes. Blindness means ability to see. So more perceptions from blind people cannot make it right. What they are trying to drive home in the poem is, a Hindu has an idea of God, a Christian has an idea of God, Muslim has an idea of God, an atheist has an idea of God. All different people have different ideas of God. If you bring all these ideas together, do you capture God? You cannot. So as long as we are playing around in the regions of what we know, as long as we are trying to possess God intellectually, it is not possible to capture it. It is not a thought, it is not an object. So in other words, what is being interpreted in these poems is the Vedantic values. Vedanta says God is not an object. God is not a thought you can use your intellect and understand. It is the subjective principle within. So just as different blind people have their own notions about an elephant, different religions, different people have their notions about God, not realizing what God truly means. This is the idea communicated in the poem. It is not respecting each other's perspective so much. That's not the scope of the poem. The scope of the poem is your perspective comes from not having the equipment to judge it. It is like I am giving a verdict on whether you should wear a mask or not. Just because I am taking Vedanta class, 20, 30 people are attending. I am giving a directive on whether people should take a virus or not. Fundamentally, do I have the expertise to comment on the subject? You understand, Agam? Am I a doctor? Am I a virologist to comment on the subject? So if you ask, should I take a virus shot or not? I don't know. Ask a doctor. Same way, don't go to a movie star and ask, what do you believe in fate? Do you believe in fate? Do you believe in God? People go and ask sports personalities just because they have won a few trophies. That's not their field. You're asking the wrong person. This is objective. Same way, internally, we believe, I know. Each and every blind person believes that I know. That's what the poem is trying to drive home. Next.
So the next question is also from Agam, and it's from the poem In His Blindness. The question says, having understood one's talents, in spite of this, the mind is not able to simply express them. It's prone to be unleashed when exposed to certain factors and spiral into indiscriminate thoughts.
Having understood one's talent, in spite of this, the mind is not able to simply express them. It's prone to be unleashed when exposed to certain factors and spiral into indiscriminate thoughts. If you know what your talent is, talent means nature. Nature manifests as thoughts and action. Stronger the nature, you create an environment. You don't wait for an environment. Weaker the nature, it waits for environment or opportunities. If all of you give me a right opportunity, then I will grow. Means I don't have enough in me. Even if all of you oppose, I will do what I am convinced, because the nature is strong. Not ego. Ego strong also, the fellow will do that, but he will pick up differences with others. When your nature is very strong, that you have inclination towards music, you could be born in a family of entrepreneurs, but you are very sure continuing business is not my nature. My nature is music. You will pursue that. So not merely understanding your talent or your nature, it is about how you go about implementing it. Apart from implementing it, willing to pay the price for it. Most of us want to pursue our nature, but we are not willing to pay the price for it. We're willing to pay the price means what? Every study, every profession, every occupation has a cost to it. I don't mean a monetary cost, effort. All of us want to be Sachin Tendulkar. All of us want to be Mike Tyson. All of us want to be Michael Jackson. Are we willing to put in the effort for it? We see those few minutes of limelight, a star coming and dancing, but how many hours of effort goes in order to bring that person to limelight? Sachin Tendulkar, whether he gets out first ball or scores a century, after the match is over, you switch off the television. There is something called as warm down in sports. After the match gets over, they don't go to hotel and feast. 2 hours they warm down. Sachin Tendulkar bats in the nets for 2 hours to build the stamina, to build the concentration. Are we willing to pay that price? So that is where the application of intellect over the mind comes. Vedanta prepares you for that. Effortlessly, your talent should manifest. Next.
And this is question 2A from Agam as well. The poem is The Toys, and the question says, Swamiji provided an intriguing example about Hanuman receiving an expensive chain, only to return it when it does not align to his higher ideal. Could you please decode the philosophical meaning here and its reference to the poem.
The reference to the poem in this example is focus. There's a story, whatever was given to Hanuman, he used to put it in his ears. If it doesn't say Ram, Ram, he throws it. This is just a story. We don't know whether it all happened. At least I don't know. What it means is anything that doesn't align with your purpose, focus in life, you don't get tempted by it. You don't get distracted by it. I'm here to teach Vedanta. Studying and teaching is my work and life. Suppose someone from University of Toronto attends classes and they say, we will offer you a job in philosophy department. You understand? For sure, a lot more people can learn this knowledge if I teach in a university, but they will decide what I have to teach. You understand? If I teach in a university or in your school, how is that you will receive this knowledge? Vis-a-vis you coming and voluntarily trying to understand what it is. You understand? Here there is no bondage, there is no compulsion, there are no rules and regulations. If you are interested, this is the way to study. No, I am not interested to learn. No one is going to force you to learn. Right? So, the focus is to deliver Vedanta, but the modus operandi of how to do it, the person has to decide. Focus is very clear. Same way, the focus of Hanuman was evolution. His mind was unilaterally devoted to Lord Ram. So anything that takes him away from that pursuit, he was not associating with it. That's what we need to learn. Health is my goal. Anything that takes me away from the idea of health, I am not for it. This unflinching intellectual conviction, resoluteness is what is taught by that example. Or else it looks like fanaticism, rigidity. It is not. When the mind holds, it is rigidity. When your intellect holds, it is conviction. Next, please.
And the final question is from Ishana. And this question comes from the village preacher. The question says, the preacher is able to identify with people around him, but he does not personalize their problems. In other words, he empathizes with others, but is not personally affected by their sorrows. How does one accomplish this?
One accomplishes by understanding the nature and limitations of people. The preacher is able to identify with people around him, but does not personalize their problems. Suppose someone comes and opens up their limitations to you. Suppose I say, Ishana, I am teaching Vedanta, but I have such a weakness for food, for watching movies. I admit to you. Just an example, Ishana. Next day, your mind will see me against these qualities. Correct? So the impression you have of the person changes. The moment you begin to know more about people, two things can happen. One is you can identify with the qualities and see if something can be done. Or we can become judgmental and hold them as hostage. So village preacher represents a person who is able to be very objective with people. What is that objectivity? Whether people open up or not, he knows what they are. It's like if you have a doctor in your family, if you go around coughing, the doctor knows that you are struggling. But if you are willing, the person is interested in helping you. No, I want to conceal all my nature. I don't want to express at all. Then there is no way the person is going to learn. Correct? So how is that the village preacher is not affected? He is not affected because he is objective. Objective is a big selling word. The word means nothing. What is that objectivity? Objectivity is that the limitations that this person has, the person will get out of it someday. Why is that a person is struggling? Because they don't have the right knowledge and direction. And the village preacher is a guru who is interested in giving that knowledge and showing that direction. So he knows that if I give the knowledge and show the direction, this person will walk out of that limitation. From this framework, he sees a potentially strong person in every weak person. You understand? He sees a potentially strong person in every weak person. As a teacher, you should see a potential scientist in every student, a potential Shakespeare in every student. If a student makes grammatical mistakes and you are irritated over it, you cannot be a teacher. Correct? Yes, this is how I spoke English when I started. But today, great gratitude to my teacher, I am able to speak better. Same way, I have to live with the inequalities of my students. That is why they are my students. If they are complete, they don't need me. This makes a guru objective. Objectivity is a big word. What is that objectivity? He is ready to live with the limitations of the students because he sees the potentially wise person coming out of it. And he is ready to put in that effort. That is a village preacher. So Vanshi, you did village preacher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are a few contexts where these lines are being reflected in the poem. Passing rich with 40 pounds a year. To mean, when your desires are less, what you have is more than sufficient. Rich or poor is not related only to quantum of wealth. It is also related to your needs in life, your desires in life. Quantum of wealth is one aspect, no doubt, but desires is another aspect. So for passing rich with 40 pounds a year to mean that whatever he had was sufficient because he knew how to live. And then line 30, it talks about a bird that tries to attract its young ones by sitting in the tip of the branch, right? How a mother bird feeds its young ones. That is how a guru trains his disciples. A guru or a teacher should not make students more dependent. A teacher's objective should be to make them independent. Day one, the mother bird cannot say fly, so it goes and feeds in the nest. Day two, it stands outside the nest and the bird comes out of the nest, takes the worm and goes back. Day three, a few meters away from the nest. And 4 or 5 days later, the mother bird has the feed in its mouth and sits in the opposite tree. The birds try to fly. The young one cannot fly because it is afraid. But the hunger and starvation makes it fly. It has the ability. And the moment it starts flying, it is independent. The mother bird after that doesn't feed because it is able to fly and look for its own feed. In that way, a guru trains the disciples, is the comparison. And the last paragraph, to them, his heart, his love, his griefs were given, but all his serious thoughts at rest in heaven. This is what Ishana is clarifying. From the mind, from his heart, he identified with people, but he did not allow their grief to affect his intellect. His intellect was attuned towards the high. That is called objectivity. Any other question? Yes, Om.
So I couldn't submit this question because I just thought of it like a little bit into the session, but it's related to Casa, Bianca. So like the word I chose for it was like faith, and like even in like the e-learning lecture, like Swamiji was explaining, like you're not supposed to take this poem like literally, right? Because obviously if you take it literally, like the person, that's not a smart decision to just like stay there standing. But even in like the way it's supposed to be taken, right? Like it says that you're supposed to kind of like have faith in like your like faith, and like when you're like following spirituality, you're supposed to have like a very strong faith. But like this poem kind of shows us how that could go like in a wrong way. So like, is it important to like have faith in somebody like in all situations, or like shouldn't you like try to like think for yourself or like think what you think is right?
Very good question. That's what Ishana also asked. What is the difference between faith and surrender? Certain qualities that are that cannot be explained or understood to mathematical precision have to be explained with exaggeration. If I ask you how much you love your mother, can you give me kilograms? 800 kilograms, I love my mother. 799 father, 650 grandma. Keshav 200, Ishana minus 25. Can you give numbers like that? Om, huh? Now I ask you a question. How much you love your father versus your mother? Can you say a lot more mother, less father, anything like that? So the moment you get into love, faith, hatred, anger, they cannot be addressed with mathematical numbers. They are intangible. This is the first thing we need to know when we read poems like this. Therefore, there is always exaggeration that is required. I am ready to give my life for you, says a lover. When you get married, you will not give anything for your partner. Right? So in the college, in the university, the boy tells the girl, that the girl tells, I will give my life for you. All poem. He will not give even a pillow when she wants to sleep. This is my pillow, you sleep with your pillow, he says. You understand? So you exaggerate by saying, I am ready to give my life. I am ready to give my life for my guru. Nothing a disciple will give. When the guru is struggling, he will leave him to struggle and he will go with his family. But all these exaggerations only communicate the extent to which you are willing. So it comes with a lot of poetic exaggeration, first. Second is, what does the poem talk about? It talks about when you are walking a path that is totally ignorant, faith is a very strong factor. You cannot ask for evidence and proof, which is a result of your action. Example, when you go to a doctor, you have diarrhea and the doctor has diagnosed that you have food poisoning. He gives you antibiotics for 10 days to take, morning and evening. Your question is, prove to me that this will work. What will the doctor say? I can't prove. The proof is in completing 10 days of medicine. So you come home, you take 2 medicines, morning and evening. Next day you are getting drowsiness. You call the doctor. Yes, you will have drowsiness. You will have nausea, 3rd day. 4th day, you won't have any appetite. You will feel very weak. 5th day, the change will start. 5 days it will take for you to get rid of all these side effects. Day 5, day 6, day 7, you will be better and better. 10th day, you will be completely all right. On what basis you will trust the doctor? Doctor you will trust, lawyer you will trust, because these are professions. But in spirituality, unless there is trust or faith in a guru, there is no way you can develop anything. Correct? Because it's an unknown path. Who knows what is God? Who knows if there is something called a spiritual evolution at all? So faith plays a very dominant role in it. What is that faith? I need to find out something beyond all that this world offers. Whoever has that faith is ready to stand on a ship that is burning. What is that ship that is burning? It is okay if I don't get a job. It is okay if my marriage is postponed. If it is okay if others call me fools. I need to learn this. Whoever has that will learn. For others, we are idiots. We are fools. Just as we would call that boy standing on the burning deck a fool or an idiot, right? You should have got out of the ship. So that is what the poet is trying to say. What is consumed on the burning deck is only the body of the boy, but the strong soul did not perish, is how the poem ends. Correct? Not exactly the same words, but that's how the poet is concluding. So, in spirituality, what gets burnt is your ignorance and ego. What comes out of it is your immortal self. That faith, whoever has will be able to pursue. But someone who doesn't have that faith will not be able to see it until they have. What is the difference between faith and surrender? faith is an inner quality, surrender is your external action. I am ready to follow what the doctor says. You are ready to surrender in areas of ignorance. Why? Because you have faith that he knows better than me. They are related to each other. Faith is your assertion in the intellect. Surrender is surrendering the ego, retaining your intellect. They are related. Okay, Om, Ishana. Any other question? Great job, all of you. Thank you very much. Over to you guys.